Well, let's start with Pete. So Pete in the Zoom room, this is a great question actually, asks, for someone like me, I'm a freelance video editor and I'm not writing blog posts or original content, but rather showcasing client work. How can I leverage SEO to drive people to my website?
Good question. So there's a few ways you can do that as a videographer. So first of all, I don't know what type of videos you make, but if you make anything that has conversation or dialogue in it, like for example, this conversation we're having, including a transcript of that is a really good idea. So you can maybe post the transcript right below the video, or you could write a blog article about that video and embed the video in there. So you could write a little bit of a summary of what you did and the different tactics you used and get some text onto the page that way. Also remember that even though you do make videos, you probably have other parts of your website where you could use some text. So your services page would probably be the big one. If you have different services, like if you do, you know, or I don't know, maybe you do corporate videos and you also do wedding videos and you also do event videos, you could have a page for each one of those. And that's an opportunity to get some text on the page, to use some of those keywords, to put them on there and, you know, use text as well as video to talk about your services.
Cool, thanks for that. Hopefully that answers your question, Pete. And perhaps a nice segue into another question from the Facebook live feed, again from Gerson, who asks, does publishing YouTube videos on a website have any positive effect on SEO? Curly one.
Sorry, did you cut out? Was that in, did you say embedding?
Yeah, sorry. Does publishing, if you publish or embed YouTube videos into your content, does that have a positive effect on SEO?
Yes, it does, because as I mentioned earlier, Google really likes diversity of content. So if you have a blog article that has a couple of videos embedded into them, or maybe an image or a graphic, or even things like a pull quote, Google recognizes that. And it does like that. Now you know, embedding the video just straight from YouTube rather than loading the video onto your CMS, your WordPress or whatever, that's fine too. You know, the thing about search engine optimization, if you're somebody who has YouTube videos on a YouTube channel, just remember that the phrase search engine optimization, I know I've been talking nonstop about Google, but remember that every website where you can search, they have their own algorithms with their own you know, tactics that people can use, and it's search engine optimization. So YouTube has its own search engine, and that means that when you're uploading your videos to YouTube, you want to make sure that you're filling out that all of that information on there, you're tagging it, you know, with the right tags, you're writing a nice description that explains what it is. That's going to impact your SEO if you're embedding that video onto your website.
Cool, thanks. And the next one is from Michael. Michael asks, does SEO work better if you are also running paid SEM? And we might need to explain what SEM is as well.
Sure. So paid SEM, SEM stands for search engine marketing, and typically refers to paid advertisements placed throughout the web. Could be Google ads, or could be ads on your website. The answer is I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think that they're kind of two different games. I don't think Google will punish you or reward you if you're using a different types of SEM. I think for the most part, Google sees organic traffic as organic traffic. It sees advertising as advertising, and it's not going to push you one way or the other. I know plenty of people who really succeed at SEO without doing any SEM.
I think the important thing is there that Google knows the difference between a click on an organic search result versus a click through a promoted paid ad. And it sounds like what you're saying is that those that data, those analytics are treated entirely separately.
Yeah, I believe so. And you know, I'm not a paid search expert, so I really can't comment too much on that. But I'm not aware of any interference, positively or negatively, between those two things. I think it's pretty much a stalemate.
Great. Now Ben has a question going back to the H1 and H2 topic that we were discussing. He says, should any heading be tagged as H1, or do we leave that to the CMS to make the page name H1?
So when you are writing the content, that's when I tag things up as H1 and H2s, because then when you copy and paste it into WordPress or whatever you're using, I can't say this is true for every CMS, but for most of the big ones, they can automatically tell what's been tagged as an H1 and an H2. A human should do it, because a human is able to organize the content that way. You kind of want to think of your H tags as like kind of like those Russian nesting dolls, right? You have like the title is a title tag, and then you have a big H1, and then underneath the H1 you might have three H2s, and under one of those H2s you might have an H3. You know, it kind of goes down in that nesting order, and that's really hard for Google to do on its own. You really need to have a human doing that kind of thing.
Okay, so Jack, it sounds like, yeah, sorry, Ben, to double check and make sure that all of those tags, heading tags are there because you want them to be, and probably best not to let your CMS or content management system do that for you. Next question, they're coming in thick and fast now. Jack is asking, is there any hope to rank on the first page with a one-page website? If so, how long should the content be? Few questions going on there, I think.
It's gonna be really, really, really hard. It's gonna be really hard because Google does not have very much context, you know, for what your website is, and it's gonna be hard to get backlinks to a single page website. It's pretty difficult. So I think it's a hard one to answer, but the answer is basically, I don't think so. No.
I guess it depends on what you're doing as well. If you're doing something that no one else in the world or very few people are doing, the chances of you coming up higher up a search list are probably improved than if you're doing something that thousands of other people are doing.
True, that if there's enough people searching for it that it's a viable business, then there's probably more than one person thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Next question from Melinda. This is probably one that a lot of our audience would ask. If I write a post for a client site, then want to republish it on my site as a work sample, linking back to the original published version, is that a good or a bad SEO strategy? Great question.
Sure. So what we need to talk about in this scenario is what's called duplicate content, which is a no-no. So you don't ever want to copy and paste a piece of content from one website to another. And the reason for that is that basically Google obviously doesn't want people doing that, because that's, in this case, of course, it would not be plagiarism. It's your own work. But Google is trying to fight plagiarism, and so it doesn't allow people to do that. And basically all Google will do is say that first one, you know, whichever one gets published first, that's the one Google considers to be the real one, and the other one it just ignores. So if you post something on your client's website first and then you copy it to your website, it's not going to do anything for your SEO because Google has already found that other page first and ranked it. But there's a few ways around that if you want to use that content. What I think might be really good opportunity is to create a case study around that piece of content so that you can talk about the piece of content. You can even talk about the subject matter, but you won't be duplicating the content word for word. You can also rewrite a piece of content. So you could take the piece of content you originally wrote and rewrite it, maybe change the structure of it a little bit, the order of things you talk about, change a lot of the text, you know, even rewriting sentence by sentence so that the language is unique, and then you can republish it. And option number 3 is, you know, post it somewhere else. You could post it on Medium or LinkedIn. If you want it to be part of your portfolio, you could publish it on LinkedIn or publish it on your Medium profile, because LinkedIn and Medium, they don't affect SEO if it's duplicate content. So that you won't be punished for doing that strategy. But short answer, don't duplicate content. Just don't do it if you can avoid it.
Great stuff. And now we're going back to the Facebook Live feed. I think maybe a question that we sort of answered before, but are there any tips that you have for SEO optimizing a smaller website? You know, is there something that you can do if you don't have a lot of text content, or you know, is it really you know, to make any impact, you really need to have some sort of minimum weight of text on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard if you don't have much text. I mean, it's really not it's really key. Text is really key. You can try to do some things, like you could try to get a lot of backlinks, maybe. That might balance out some of the lack of text because you have more websites linking to you. That is probably the best thing that you could do. But really, if you don't have much text on your website, it's just going to be a struggle. Maybe this isn't the right channel for you if you don't want to add more text to your website. You know, there are plenty of other marketing channels you can use if SEO doesn't fit. But if you do like text, if you do have the opportunity to put text on your website, highly recommend SEO.
Great. And finally, from Gerson as well, who's been a very good source of some good questions today. Thanks, Gerson. What is your opinion on AI-produced SEO content?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I can see my job slipping away. No, I'm kidding. I think it's cool. Like, I think it's pretty interesting and fascinating. Gosh, no one has actually ever asked me that question. I guess it is a little disturbing to think that perhaps robots might be better at this than me, but I guess call me old school, maybe because I have a literature degree, but I don't think robots can ever really be quite as good as a real human being. So I guess my answer is like, come at me, AI, because I think I'm probably better at it.
There you go. I love the response. So we've got one or two more questions, it seems. So last call for questions, guys. If you've got something for Liam. So we've got another great one from Crystal. This is a great question, actually. She says, I'm a photographer and would love to hear about ways to optimize images for SEO, for example, via metadata.
Yeah, great question. And absolutely something you should definitely be doing every time you upload an image to your site is to add that metadata in. And the most important thing is the alt tag, which you'll see when you're uploading it to your website. It's one of the fields you can fill out whenever you upload an image to your website. And your alt tag is basically there to tell Google what the picture is of. So the best thing to do is to literally just write a description of what the picture is. So let's say, you know, you uploaded a picture of somebody looking at their cell phone. You might put in the alt text, woman looking at cell phone she's wearing, or you might write, woman in yellow dress standing on city street looking at cell phone. And that is really just to provide Google with some more context around what the image is, because as I mentioned earlier, Google's not so good at understanding images. It's really good at understanding text. So when you add the text to the image, you're basically explaining what Google is. You don't need to worry too much about cramming keywords into those alt tags. That's not really what it's about. It's more about Google knowing that you put the time and the effort in to make its job easier, and you're going to be rewarded for just that little bit of work.
Do those alt tags, do they help with accessibility as well for people who may have a vision impairment or something like that, who might use a screen reader? That's also an important aspect of that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes beyond SEO. And so much of SEO is about making the user experience better, right? So that also means making it more inclusive for people who may have, you know, certain impairments or may need a screen reader. Using an alt tag is basically just a way to make it easier for whoever is on your website to know what your pictures are. The other thing too, just quickly on pictures with SEO, is just to remember what I said about site speed. I find images are the #1 thing that slow websites down. These people upload these images to their website. They don't realize that they're huge, huge files. I'm not saying you have to make the images smaller. I'm just saying you have to make the image file size a little bit smaller. It might mean reducing the quality just a little bit, but it probably will save you time because big images slow down websites.